we'll decide. And if we like the same girl, back off, she's mine.
Hello, I am Nicole Weaver with Collider, and I'm here to talk to Monica of Love is Blind Season 7. Hello, Monica.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Now, I wanted to talk about your story and really how it ties in with all of the women's stories this season. You've already opened up a little bit about the details about your engagement. So, this to kind of go further into what that dynamic was like. So, one of the things is that everyone has the same criticism of that. Maybe you were too easygoing in the pod. Steven says, I've cheated in the past. We see you say, I'm so sorry you went through that. Was that really the back and forth? Because we know it's not always as it seems.
Yeah, so I think that obviously, I think viewers understand this by now. There's so much that you don't see. Like we spend hours and hours and hours dating in those pods, especially if you end up getting engaged. Like leading up to that, you have dates that are 5 hours long. I think Stephen and I, including like dating during the day, and then you sometimes had the option to do night dating. I think one day we dated for close to like eight to 9 hours or something in total. And that was just one day alone. So there's a lot that you don't see. I think to answer your question, was I being too easy on Steven? I'd say no. I have no regrets on having an open heart, having an open mind. And, when you're connecting with someone and it feels like everything in the relationship is going so well, and they're very upfront and forthcoming with you about the fact that they once got caught emotionally cheating, sending, DMs to another woman, which I don't downplay emotional cheating. Like it's still, stepping outside of a relationship and it's a form of betrayal. But in my experience with cheaters in the past, most are not very upfront about previous transgressions. So I totally appreciated the fact that he brought it to me pretty early into getting to know one another and that he felt terrible for it, had done the work, had, been in therapy, and it was a huge regret in his life. So, yeah, there was nothing that I could have known in that moment that would have led me to where things ended. So no regrets. And then one other point to add there, when he says to me that he cheated, there was probably more in that. I don't think anyone would ever say to me, hey, I cheated on someone, and I would reply with, I'm so sorry. So, there was more there, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. So I wanted you to address that part of it. Yes, I think being open, going in, I think most women come into this experience trying to be open, trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. And then there's a question of, are these men also genuinely going in with the same way? Or do they have other motives and is kind of taking advantage of that? So from there with Steven, he does talk about the cheating. It does seem like, oh, this is a very honest person. But now in hindsight, it's like, did he do all of this to kind of prep you for like, there's so much more worse that might go
Yeah.
on. I'm gonna come out and see like I'm an honest person now. I don't know. Did that ever come across your mind?
I think it's really easy to maybe think that now, right? But if I'm being totally honest, like, no, I don't think Steven was trying to prep me for what he might do. In the same breath, I think that perhaps Steven got a little bit caught up. Like, I don't know. I think it's very clear that ultimately he was not ready for a committed relationship, at least on like my terms of a monogamous relationship, and certainly not ready for marriage.
Mhm.
Um, so I think he wants to be a good guy. I think he wants to do the right. And I'm not saying he's not a good person, but I don't think that he was ready for marriage and again, not even a committed monogamous relationship.
Yeah. Stephen also opened up about his surprising family history during the pods.
Yeah.
He brings up these books that he's reading and everything like that. And at the beginning, you seemed to be like, this could be like a good sign that this is an open-minded person willing to look into a different history than before. But then we get drinks in Mexico and we're telling our stories, and Steven starts talking about the books, and you're like, let's tamp down on that. Did you have a different perspective then about his story with that during that time, or was there something else going on there when you started shutting that down?
I don't think in Mexico I did shut him down or ask for like more space in the conversation, but it wasn't related to that topic.
Mm,
Um, I
okay.
was always, uh, yeah, I don't, it was never related to that topic. I think that there was a moment where I was joking with the other guys who he, was friends with and close with, of like telling them about our engagement and being like, I don't know if Steven told you guys this, but when he proposed, I responded with like, I love the fact that you're barely that black and you did research on it. And then you see us all laugh. I, from the moment I first met Steven in the pods to this day now, I think one of the most endearing things about him is that he was incredibly inquisitive about where he came from and about his culture and his identity. And even if it's like a small percentage of it, it wasn't just about him reading the books. He signed up for a course he was in college at that time, and he signed up for a course on African studies. Like there was a lot of things that he did that just made my heart like pitter patter with, gosh, he really cares about this. And I think that that's really sexy. I think that that's really cool.
Okay. Now another thing that happens in Mexico with Steven, he again, the drinks, there's fireworks going on. He doesn't go with you to the fireworks. Then he sits down and he's talking about what could happen once the show is out. You said on the Files podcast that that was not the first time he said something like that, or the last.
Mhm.
What was the first time?
Gosh, I don't know if I remember. I think what I would say, what I do remember is relatively early into our trip in Mexico, before that party, before the fireworks happened, and you see me being disappointed again in Stephen, like talking the talk, but not really walking the walk and showing up for me as his new fiance. I'm someone who like really appreciates small gestures. And so to me, yeah, it was like we're on an expedited timeline here. So you don't have any room to like not say what you think or to say like that really hurt my feelings or I expected more. Like if you're, thinking about getting married to this person, you have to be confident enough in what you want out of a long-term relationship to voice those things. And I think early into the trip in Mexico, Stephen basically started saying to me that, you know, do you don't know if we'll really get married, right? Like we both always kind of said that we were hesitant to, if I thought it was going to be a no for me, I don't think I would be able to say that no at the altar. So like that was kind of my commitment to him and myself of like, God, I wouldn't put my been waiting 36 years at that time for this. Like, if I know it's a no, I'm not going to do the whole wedding part of it. And so, in that conversation, Stephen was like, well, like, is our what if we left here? It's like boyfriend and girlfriend was kind of the vibe I was getting. So it was like not just his kind of, we had a lot of like sexual jokes, but also it was me being really frustrated with the fact that like you just put a ring on my finger. We just got engaged. Like, I'm really in this. Like, I can't believe it, but I'm so in love with you. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, now that we're out of these pods, like, wink, wink, do we really think you really want to get married? And I'm like, yeah, I really think I want to get married. So yeah,
Wow.
that was my frustration.
Yeah. I think talking about that, there's multiple women this season that are making like big compromises for these relationships. You said that Steven wasn't your physical type, and then he loses his job, so you're financially covering him. Ashley on her own is getting surprised by Tyler is like a donor and therefore has biological kids. Marissa had her livelihood questioned by Ramses. And now, when she's feeling under the weather, they're talking about whether intimacy will be a problem. We're seeing over and over these women having to give so much. I just wondered, like, does that feel like, did it feel like that at the time? Because it feels like that watching as a woman is like, wow, these men just want it their way and that's it.
It definitely didn't feel like that at the time. I think that all the women would agree that these are all really meaningful, real relationships for both the women and the men. I really do think, and I think that there was compromise happening on both sides. And that's what you signed up for before you went into an experiment like this. It's like I said before, Stephen and I spent one day dating for 10 hours. It's a lot of time with no distractions, no opinions of family members, friends, no taking a break to scroll through Instagram. Like that is your reality. A thing that I didn't realize before actually going into this experiment is after you leave the pods, you literally feel like you know this person so well and you've talked about everything. Then you quickly realize like there's still so much more to them. So I remember struggling with that of like, oh wait, finding out something new about Steven in Mexico and being like, why don't you say that to me in the pods? But then it would happen in the other way. It's like we were still sharing and getting to know one another. And so I think the best relationships are there is compromise that happens. So I really don't think we're all like very strong, successful women, both personally, professionally, like who have had relationships in our past. Like none of us stepped into this being like, I've never had a boyfriend. Like we're seasoned. And I think we were just doing what it takes to show up for our partners and, be understanding without being overly like giving up on our values, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. Like everyone is very strong. I think it's just still the societal expectation, like of just like also these men are not being honest and upfront. Like, when do you think would have been a good time for Stephen to be very transparent of what he was into, like intimate wise? Because you were blindsided by that. And I think that was like a huge problem in that relationship.
Honestly, the answer to that question is I think that Steven shouldn't have, he says it. I don't think that he should have done the experiment. I
Mhm.
think that what we saw from him in the end wasn't about, you know, what he was into or like a kink or a fetish. It was just like he wasn't ready for a committed relationship. He still had a lot of work to do on himself to feel secure enough you know, in having a partner. Because he said this to me, but he also said it when he told me about the indiscretion that happened in his past. It was like I didn't feel good enough for you. I didn't feel good enough for that woman. And it's like I really don't like that as your reasoning. It's like, why are you here? That's not my fault. You can't use that as an excuse. So I don't think he didn't tell. Like, what would he have said? Like, I sometimes cheat emotionally when I'm in a relationship. He
I
just
guess
shouldn't have done.
he kind of already did say that. Technically,
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
kind of. But
but
then it was followed up
I'm
with like, it was the biggest regret of my life. So not really,
I
you
think the
know?
big thing though is like I think you're unfairly, and you've addressed this in this other interviews of like kink shaming. It's like it's not kink shaming, it's that he withheld that information and then was trying to like it felt like test in the waters of making jokes
Yes.
and then you're blindsided. So that's why my question is just for anyone watching,
Yeah.
when is a good time to bring up something if you know sexual compatibility is that important in a relationship?
Very early on. Probably then he should have that conversation where he told me about the emotional cheating in the past was pretty early into our relationship,
Mm.
like maybe date 2 or 3, which is very early. And I loved that because again, I was like, wow, he's being honest. In that same conversation, it should have been followed up with like a I've done the work, but I still think that this is something I struggle with or I'm into, or, he had plenty of opportunities. So
Yeah. I will say kudos to you and how you handled the last scene with those. It was so raw and emotional. What was it like watching it back, and what has been the response from that?
yeah, it was really difficult living it and watching it back. It was just, gosh, like no one likes to see themselves be so down. Like, and that was, I felt like I was on this like cycle of like, oh, I got cheated on again and again and again. So I was really, really hurt. But the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I think after the first drop of episodes, after episode 6 ended, I certainly got my fair share of like people coming for me. Like some people out there thought I was just the most materialistic, on my high horse, not willing to listen to my partner, bratty human being. And there's still people out there who think that, but overwhelmingly it's been like people having so much compassion for me, being so proud of me for standing up for myself. I've gotten so many messages, hundreds of messages from women who have said, I wish I have an ex who owes me so much money, and I knew it in the moment when we were breaking up, and I wish I would have asked for that money. Like that like makes me so sad that this is so many women are like, I've been there before, and gosh, I didn't get my money back. Also women saying I would never let my kids, my daughter watch Love is Blind, my younger daughter, but I'm actually letting them watch your scene, my adolescent teen, because I think that it's like amazing how you handled yourself. So I will say that for me, that wasn't an act or something like cool that I'd thought of. Yeah, it was just I have an ex who owes me about $1,100 still to this day. And he promised to make me good on it a very long time ago. And I trusted him during our breakup, and I never got that money back. So when I was in that situation with Stephen, it was very natural for me to be like, this is never happening to me again. Before you actually walk out the door, please take out your phone, because I've let you borrow, quite a bit of money. So
That's my thing of like people trying to come at you and say materialistic. You're so obviously a giving person.
thank you.
And it's like, yeah, some people are just trying to take advantage of that. So I agree. Absolutely kudos.
Thank you.
Um, in the recent episodes, all of the women come back together for that Great Gatsby 20s party. And I just couldn't imagine all of the stories that had to be exchanged between you guys, even though I know you guys probably have a group chat and is keeping up. But can you talk a little bit about the debriefing? Because I'm thinking about Ashley saying, well, my man has kids, just found that out. You're like, well, this is over with because he did me dirty. Taylor's going through it. She's been smooth this whole entire time. What was
Yeah.
that night like?
It was a shit show. That night was a shit show. Luckily, like it was also really fun. We were drinking, having a good time, but there was so much going on. I Ashley is like we're super, super close. She's my closest. I love all the women, but she's my closest friend from the experiment. So I already knew what was going on. So you know, we'd had conversations. Um, I was most anxious to see, because Alex and Tim had broken up, but they were going to be in the same room together at that time. I was like, how is this going to play out? Um, you
What was
have
that like?
it's interesting because if you see at the party, I walk in, I say meow, which I was like, why did you say that when you entered the room? But I say meow. And then I sit down with the girls and I let them know that, like, I kind of bring the temperature down of like, Steve and I had been broken up. For that scene that you saw where I found the text had been a few days prior. And we hadn't spoken until the day of the party randomly. And I say to the girls, we spoke for a couple of hours, like it's done, but he's a good person and I wish him well. for me, Alex and Tim, there was a lot of distance and anger between the two of them at that time. And it was not, no one had caught texts, like no one had stepped outside the relationship. Like, so I don't know. I was a little like, what happened there? Why is there so much anger? So that was weird. I like kind of Alex is my girl, so I stayed close to her side and like kind of just
So
kept
you were
my
more, were you confused by anger on both sides or one side more than the other?
obviously I think you'll see some of that play out at the reunion. Like I think it's hard to kind of say. I will say that Alex is my girl, so I'm
Tim.
obviously hearing more of her perspective, right?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
so but you'll see more of that kind of play out soon.
Yeah, I think viewers are also kind of confused about where Tim's coming from. And this kind of ties into a previous question I had with you is like, again, I feel like all of the women are giving so much into these relationships and being very kind to their partners. And where for you, it ends with Stephen barely even trying to have a conversation. And then Tim saying, I never want to see you again. And this woman,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's where I'm feeling like there's a weird gender imbalance of like, but if a woman does any little thing, dead to
Yeah.
me, where the women, you're still saying Steven's a good guy,
I
which could
know.
be
Yeah.
frustrating to some.
It's hard, and Nick Vile said the same thing to me of like, well, you're saying that, but is he a good guy? I do think he's a good guy. I do. Do I think he has his issues? Do I think that he did me really fucking dirty? Am I glad I found out when I did? Like, yes, all of those things. Am I so glad that like it was like a blessing to find out when I did, you know?
Mhm.
Everything, I still believe everything happens for a reason. I have no regrets. And I've learned a lot, like as now being a 37-year-old woman. I used to be someone where, in the past, if someone were to have done something like that to me, I would have been incredibly angry and hateful, and that never served me. Like, I think you have to kind of experience relationships, and I don't hope anyone has to experience betrayal, but if you do, like, you have to kind of go through those motions over time to figure out what best serves you. For me, I'm able to live a happy, very fulfilling life and advance forward by like trying to come to some sort of resolution. And so that's what I did. And I like, yeah. So what was hard for me, and I do think you make very valid points, about just women. And I think we see this in relationships often, generally speaking, like women are maternal, we're givers. Like that tends to be the dynamic more often than not. When Stephen, I was very surprised in that moment and confused as to what between Stephen and I when I find the text of like, you're not even going to fight for me. Like you're immediately dipping, and most hurtful of all, you're looking at the cameras and saying, I'm going to have to deal with this forever. It's like I don't think you really care that you truly hurt me in that moment. I think you care that you got caught on a television show. It's very like that when he looked at the cameras and said that, for me, I literally felt like a dagger was going through my heart because I was just like, wow, that's why you care. You're not looking me in the eyes. It was really shitty.
Ooh, you're not looking me in the eyes. Wow,
Yeah.
that's an important point. Well, it was so good talking to you, Monica. Thank you for your time and being so open about this very hard story that we watched. I hope you're happy in a good place
Yeah.
today.
I'm so happy. Yeah. Life is
Good.
great. So I'm so happy, so grateful. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for doing this and have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Take care.